an interesting experiment they did in the book Subliminal, or they mentioned in the book Subliminal. It was not a test that was done for the book, but that was that in a shopping mall in Iowa they had a number of subjects that pretended to be thieves, shoplifters, and they went into a big store and stuffed things in their coats, their pockets, in clear view of a test subject that could see that. And the idea was to see if the test subject would report it. So later they sent another person of the psychology team towards the test subject to sort of rearrange some stuff in the aisle, and the idea was that the test subject had an opportunity to report the theft. Now this was all in cooperation with the stores, and they did that about 50 times in that shop, and they did it in several other shops in the mall as well. It was like an epidemic of shoplifting taking place there. And what they wanted to test is what the clothing and the looks, the exterior of someone, how that affected the frequency of reporting the thief. And one set of people had like soiled pants and unshaven, and they had some workman's shirt, and the other ones had slacks and good pants and a sports jacket and a tie and well shaven. And it turned out, as you might expect, that they indeed reported the person in with the scruffy looks much more than the ones that were dressed upper class. And what the researchers also noticed, that the way in which they reported was also much different. They said things like, "That son of a bitch stuffed something in his coat," and like his looks revealed a whole story about his scruffy character. There was only the tip of the iceberg. There was a whole bunch of more bad stuff underneath. And with a well-dressed man, on the other hand, they were very hesitant to report him. And that is interesting, I think, and they said that was kind of irrational, but I think it makes sense, because a well-dressed thief could be very dangerous, a very powerful person. I mean, it's the same with the government. They are, and the mafia also, they're also quite well dressed. They look very well to do, and they steal people's money. But to go against them and to expose them is a very dangerous thing, because they also have a lot of power. And I think that is what people sense when they see a thief with a scruffy outlook of a very well dressed thief. I think they process their elephant. If you look my previous talk about the elephant and the rider, I think their elephant processes that there could be danger in exposing a very well dressed thug. There could be consequences that could be very negative. So that was an interesting thing. Another one is the nonsense reasons that people accept, not only give. So we had in this earlier talk, I told about the elephant and the rider, and the rider gives nonsense arguments for what the elephant has decided to do, basically. But people also accept nonsense arguments, and the experiment they did to prove that is someone went to a library and where there was a Xerox machine, and it was a little bit outdated. Nowadays you would have a printer. But they went to when someone went to the Xerox machine, they immediately went up there and said, "Excuse me, I must make 5 copies. Can I use the copy machine?" And without giving any reason. And what happened is that 40% of the people said, "No, I was using the copy machine." So if you give no reasons, then a decent amount of people says no. The strange thing is that if you now give a reason, if you go to the person and say, "Please, can I use the copy machine because I'm in a hurry?" The reason is I'm in a hurry. Then the percentage drops to about 6% refusal. So many more people allow the person to go in front of them because he's in a hurry. And you could conclude that these people hear the reason, they have empathy with this person, they process it, they say, "Oh, that's a valid reason," and they let the person go ahead. But the researchers suspected that something else was at play, and that people were not consciously evaluating the reason, processing it, and determining that it was a valid reason. They thought that the script went something like this: no reason, disapprove; reason, approve. Whatever that reason was, XXX was good. And to test this, they changed the experiment like this. They went up to these people and said, "Excuse me, I have 5 copies. Can I use the copy machine? Because I have to make some copies." So they just repeated themselves, basically. All they said in the second part, the reason they gave, they said because, but the reason they gave was kind of obvious. That was what they said in the first place. I have to make some copies. So can I use it to make some copies? But if you say, well, since it was a nonsense reason and didn't add any extra information, you might expect the refusal to go back to 40%, which it was, with no reason at all. But it doesn't happen. It goes to about 7%, so it is very close to the 6%, even though the reason didn't make any sense at all. And I think that is at play a lot in people's reasoning. It works both ways. They give bogus reasons, but they accept bogus reasons also, and especially when there is some danger in play or some pressure that pushes the elephant in you into a certain direction. And I think it also accumulates that if you give 3 reasons, even though there are 3 bogus reasons, I think that still increases the chances that persons agree. So if you say, "Hey, I need half your income," then people will probably say, "No, why? Go away." But if you say, "I need your income because I'm going to take care of the poor. I want to take care of the poor, or I need to take care of your security," then you give a couple of reasons, and that works pretty well. Now, of course, there has to be some push to the elephant that also makes the elephant want to comply with the request or demand, and then the rider accepts a bogus argument. So there's something reciprocal in that. There's a strange effect that people give bogus reasons for what they do. If their elephant decides to go one direction, then their rider comes up with a reason why he wanted to do that anyway. And we've seen the examples with the food with the fancy names and the partner choices. But on the other hand, people also accept bogus reasons from others and comply with that if there is some pressure behind it. Another interesting thing in this book was the VMPC, and I have to look up what the VMPC was again. Ventricle, I forgot. Well, it is a part of the brain with a difficult name. And some people have brain damage on that part of the brain, and that part of the brain takes care of brand awareness. So in brands, that is also something, there is some social pressure going to choose for a certain brand. So what I mentioned in the book earlier is the Pepsi paradox, and that is that if people do a blind test between Coca-Cola and Pepsi, then they often choose the Pepsi to be the best tasting cola. But if they know the brand, then they Coca-Cola, because that is the brand you're supposed to like. And you can even change the experiment in such a way that if people can change their choice afterwards, then they actually change it to Coca-Cola away from Pepsi, just to be in the good camp, basically. And the strange thing is that if you take people with brain damage on their VMPC area, that don't have this brand awareness, they give the same report on what is the best cola, but they do not change their opinion in the face of showing the brand. If they know the brand, then their percentages do not flip like with healthy people with a brand area in their brain. And this is also quite interesting, I thought. A last experiment that is also quite funny is that they gave people a taste test for some jam. They have to say, do you think this is a better tasting jam than this one? And they had a kind of trick jam jar that had two compartments in it that were separated by something in the middle. And the researcher could seemingly from the same jar take the other kind of jam by flipping the jam jar around. And what they did is the person said, well, I like this one the best. They made their choice, and then they gave some excuse. Well, can you taste it again and give us try to give a good description, explanation why it is a better jam. But the second time they flipped this jar around, and for the test subject it seemed to be the same jar that they just approved of as the best tasting jam, but they gave the other jam they thought of the less well tasting jam. And people did not notice that. They saw it come from the same jar, and when they have to explain why they thought it was the best jam, then they started to come up with all kind of flattering descriptions about that jam that they disapproved of the first time. But they apparently they want to seem consistent, and these reasons are just, they are generated out of nowhere. It's really amazing, and I think it's very important to understand how that works. People just, yeah, they just make stuff up. And that is the famous rider on the elephant that I talked about in the earlier video. It is really remarkable how that works. That has nothing, it is completely disconnected. And yeah, these are, I think they're very interesting things to know how people operate, how they come to conclusions. And I think a lot of people know this by instinct, and they feel it, and they know how to deal with it and how to manipulate it. But I think very little people are obviously aware of it, or how that works. And it is useful to read some of these books and to figure out, hey, does that work like that, and does it work for me also like that, and do I probably also have a lot of these things. Although I think that a lot of libertarians and anarchists have some damage to their VMPC area also, because they when they hear, well, the government is basically just a group of people that achieves their goals by means of threats with violence, with jail and law courts and policemen with guns. and that's the only way in which they differ from other people that do it on a voluntary basis, like they do in foundations or companies or clubs. And the libertarian and anarchist says, yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, you're right. That makes total sense. But I think if you have a properly functioning VMPC brain, then that will steer you away from a very dangerous position. And I think people like Snowden and who's now in from Hong Kong fleeing for the authorities, and a guy like Bradley Manning and Julian Assange, they have probably poorly developed or damaged VMPC area, and when they see something like truth and they think, hey, wait a second, that is bad, I revealed that. And to a great detriment of their personal well-being, like Bradley Manning is being tortured. And yeah, you could say that is really dumb. And if you have a proper functioning VMPC area, that, or a good working elephant, that will push you away from this rational conclusion that is of a danger to your well-being. So I hope you learned something, and let me know what you think. All right, bye bye.